We'd like to keep it positive here, though, so we're mostly going to talk starts, and then we'll talk about something else in place of where we normally do sits. So for quarterbacks that people should put in their lineups, who do you have?
Well, I think the one quarterback I'm being asked about the most is Justin Herbert. And I have confidence in him this week going up against the Atlanta Falcons. I shouldn't have had the hubris that I had with him going up against the New England Patriots because I'm like, I know Belichick's good against rookie quarterbacks. Shut up. He's at home. And it didn't work out. It was terrible. If you lost, if you didn't make the playoffs because of it, well, you're probably not listening. Well, if you did make it like me, I lost out on the first round bye. I've now got to play this week. I'm thankful that it is the Falcons who've allowed a lot of passing touchdowns this season, around 2 a game. Herbert has thrown 2 touchdown passes per game in 7 of his last 9 games. The Falcons have still allowed some of the most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. I don't know what it is this morning, but it's top 5 at the very worst. So I'm comfortable with Justin Herbert. I'm very comfortable with Ryan Tannehill this week again, too. It's kind of like Ryan Tannehill had that rough stretch. It's kind of like when Chris Pratt made the jump to movies and he started doing Guardians of the Galaxy and all that stuff. You're like, he's never going to make a bad movie again. He's awesome. And then he did Passengers and he's like, this guy sucks. Go back to Parks and Rec. But his next movie was Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And you're like, oh, he's awesome again. And I think that that's kind of the arc that Ryan Tannehill has taken this season. And he's going up against my friends down in Duval County. They've allowed at least 2 touchdown passes in 6 consecutive games. They're amongst the lead leaders in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So that's a good one. And you know what? Can I say one other thing? I know we don't have B-roll for it, so sure. I'm going to keep it quick. If you have Kirk Cousins, and you're obviously probably not going to play him this week against Tampa Bay, because Kirk Cousins is the quarterback equivalent of the Hanson MMMBop song. Like, it's cool to watch at home. Do we have tape of Kirk Cousins? This is awesome.
Look at that.
But MMMBop is something that you like to enjoy at your home. You don't want people outside of the house seeing you do that. You know, you don't want to be like just bumping around in your car like it's the beginning of The Hangover 3 or something like that. But I will say this about Cousins. He's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game at home, less than 12 on the road. He's on the road at Tampa Bay. You don't want to play him. Week 15, he's got the Bears. Personally, I won't make this move, but I think that's a great option. I think that Kirk Cousins, especially, let's see how the Bears play this week, how they respond to that Detroit loss. If they're going into the tank, this is a must-start Kirk Cousins game in week 15. So don't drop him. Hold on to him if you can.
Didn't think Hanson was going to make it to the show, but here we are. There it is.
I do.
Running back starts. Who's on your list?
I'm going to go with Aaron Jones, who I forgot was a thing, and then he busted out a 77-yard touchdown run. You're like, oh, that's right, Aaron Jones plays for the Green Bay Packers. I believe we were just a week removed from people freaking out about Jamal Williams and saying like, oh my gosh, what is happening with this Packers backfield? And I think now, I haven't checked the stats. I don't think he's going to get 19 touchdowns this season. But I think that this is a great opportunity against the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions. Sorry. There's this nice guy on Twitter who always corrects me. I've been saying it wrong my whole life. I don't know if it's a Chicago thing, a Southern California thing. Detroit. They've allowed a lot of fantasy production to running backs this season. They've allowed 23 rushing touchdowns to the position, and they've allowed a lot of scrimmage yards as well. This might not be a huge Aaron Rodgers game this week. I'm kind of worried about it. I think they're going to turn to the running attack, so I love him. And obviously with Derrick Henry, I think sometimes when we get into this fantasy game, we don't talk enough about the guys who are really good. And I know that nobody's going to be sitting Derrick Henry this week. There's not. I don't know. He could have a string of donuts and bagels in my point total. I'm still going to go out there and start him, especially against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who've allowed a lot of fantasy production. And of course, we remember that Thursday night game a couple of years ago where he had the 99-yard touchdown run. So there's no way that you're going to be sitting Derrick Henry. And of course, we're also waiting for, are we talking about Cam Akers and wiretaps? That's also another one that would be a start for me if he's healthy and ready to go.
We're not, so we can talk about him here. That's fine.
You want to talk about him for a sec? Like, do we have a moment?
Sure.
Like, I just want to say that I know that the matchup is tough and it's difficult going up against the New England Patriots, but I think that we started seeing this a couple of weeks ago. We didn't want to dive in completely with Cam Akers because we're like, it still seems a little too good to be true. But I think it now is starting to look, Marcus, like all the things that we said about him in the offseason finally starting to come to fruition. And if for whatever reason, if he's still available on your waiver wire and on NFL.com waivers hit tonight, if you're in a smaller league, like a 10-team league and nobody bought in, just check. But if you've got him, and he practices in full on Wednesday, and I know that we record this before the Rams practice report has come out, but if he's a full go on Wednesday, I think I'm starting him.
I think I am too. I mean, my only beef with Cam Akers is that he was stuck in a rotation. That didn't have anything really directly to do with him. But if Sean McVay wants to give him the ball, yeah, fine, I'm on board with it. So I know the Cam Akers hive is just excited to take victory laps when and where they can. Wide receiver starts. Who do you have?
Well, I'm going to go with Tyler Boyd this week. And obviously he was bounced last week after his 75-yard touchdown. But that's okay. You gave me 15 points. Take the rest of the afternoon off. I'm magnanimous like that. I'm not counting on you as much as I'm counting on DK Metcalf or DeAndre Hopkins. I get mad at those guys if they don't perform. But if Tyler Boyd is sitting there as my wide receiver 3, and he gives me 15 fantasy points, we're cool. And now he's going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who've allowed going into last night's game, it was the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. They've allowed 19 receiving touchdowns. Hollywood Brown got into the end zone last week, so I feel very comfortable with that. And I also love Calvin Ridley this week. He's right there, averaging close to 18 fantasy points per game. He's had at least 14 in 9 of his last 11. The Chargers have allowed 2+ receiving touchdowns in 7 consecutive games. The secondary is a little bit of a mess. They aren't really getting to the quarterback. I hope that this is going to be a high-scoring game out here in Inglewood. So I love Calvin Ridley this week. I like Tyler Boyd this week as well. And I feel like this is a Marcus Grant guy. I think Jamison Crowder is another wide receiver that I like this week too. I think that he's been playing fantastic. And I think that that's somebody that you have to get into your lineup.
Sam Darnold and slot receivers go together like chicken and waffles. So yeah, I'm totally on board with Jamison Crowder. I'm down for that. Okay, so for us plebes who don't have Travis Kelce on our roster, what tight end should we start?
Well, I'm going to go with Rob Gronkowski. And this reminds me of the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania 13, after Shawn Michaels was going to take some time off because of his back injury, and Triple H came out and talked about going to the Click, going back to guys that you're familiar with. I feel that Tom Brady is in that mode with Rob Gronkowski, having to go to somebody that he knows that he can trust, that he's counted on for years. And Gronkowski has been a really good fantasy tight end, 13+ fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games. He's had at least 6 targets in 3 out of his last 4 games. I went back and used Next Gen Stats to see where those targets are coming from. And a lot of them are coming on 1st and 2nd down. So they're really going to him. They're making it a point to get Rob Gronkowski involved. So I make sure that I have him in my lineup this week. I know they're coming off a bye, so you might want to go back and check. A lot of faith in Rob Gronkowski. And I have a lot of faith in Eric Ebron, too. They're going up against the Buffalo Bills. The Steelers' offense looked a little off on Monday, but I guess that's going to happen when you have a game that's supposed to be played on Thanksgiving. Or when was that game supposed to be played? Like their schedule has been moved around so much. I really, honest to God, believe that the number one tiebreaker for the playoffs this season is how many times have your games been moved? That should be the first tiebreaker. If them and the Chiefs have the same record, they should look at the Steelers and be like, how many times have your games been moved? The Steelers, all of them. Okay, yeah, I think you get the tiebreaker, guys. But I really like Eric Ebron. I really like the way that they've been using him. And, Eric Ebron came out during the offseason or the preseason, and he was talking himself up, and he's gone out there and backed it up. Now, he hasn't gone out and put up Travis Kelce or Darren Waller numbers, but he's been very good. So I'm going to start him this week.
I feel like tight end has become it's like the old Mad TV skit of lowered expectations, like the weird dating service they had. Like that's kind of like tight end, right? Like if you're willing to sort of accept a little bit less, you can find some good guys out there to start. Eric Ebron has, he has fit nicely into that mold. I even saw people hyping up Tyler Eifert this morning, which, to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, I haven't heard that name in a long time. So I guess there are tight end gems out there to be found if you are willing to sort of adjust your expectations a little bit. Defensive starts for this week. Which ones are good ones?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. You went from Obi-Wan to Ben. Like that was a huge
Right?
drop. At least he tried to disguise his name, unlike Luke Skywalker.
He didn't even change his last name though. He was just Ben Kenobi. Like what?
Like that, I guess there's not like a Yellow Pages type of service in that galaxy where they can be like, hey, do you think you have a son? How about the planet you came from? Do you have any relatives there? Do you want to check in on? In any event, let's talk about the Seahawks defense. I believe is going to be the first one off. I hope that's the first one that's queued in and ready to go. I know a lot of people have picked them up over the last couple of weeks because they've had some really nice matchups, and it hasn't always been working out that great, even though this team is a lot better, but it's a Jamal Adams revenge game against his former team, the New York Jets. Seattle is coming off their worst game of the season. Their fans are freaking out. I love the overreaction by fans too. They're like, this is the most embarrassing loss that I've ever seen the Seahawks make. It's like, settle down, people. Brian Bosworth got run over in the end. Although I like the Boz, and I felt like he kind of stood Bo Jackson up and then was just kind of, the momentum carried him into the end zone. But in any event, I like the Seahawks defense this week. I also like the football team's defense as well. I think this is a pretty good, I think I came across impressed with them on Monday night, Monday afternoon, Tuesday. Was it today? Did they play this morning? I don't know, but I like what the football team's got going. This is something that we've talked about for the entire year, is that this front seven is one of the best in the league. And if they could, imagine if they would have been the ones who had signed James Bradberry, or if they had James Bradberry in their secondary. We could be talking about a team that's pretty good, or a defense that's exceptional. But even as it stands right now, they're really good, and you can play them against the 49ers. I don't expect the 49ers to play as poorly as they did in their game on Monday night. They've had to have a lot of flexibility with their schedule, playing in Arizona, playing their home games in Arizona. Really an unusual year. I like Nick Mullins. And I like the graphics that they were pulling up. Like, he's had as many yards in his first whatever games as Patrick Mahomes. You're like, good for him, man. Like, he'll probably be an afterthought. Like, no disrespect. Like, you're probably not going to be people aren't going to be talking about you 30 years from now. But you can always pull out that video, and you can pull it out for his grandkids. And they'll be like, check this out. They're like, what app is that? You're like, it's called Twitter. Like, what's Twitter? Like, I don't know. Just watch this video. I kept it just for this reason. But that was good. But I think we can stream the Washington FT. Of course, the obvious defenses you're playing. If I might say one other thing, don't drop the Browns. The Browns still have the Giants and the Jets coming up. They have the Ravens this week, and now you probably don't want to play them. But they've got the Jets and the Giants, so you might want to hold on to it. Oh, and by the way, how about that kid on Twitter who got mad at us because we were talking about the Browns last week? Like, oh, of course you'd say that against the Titans. Right. Hey, bro, how do you feel today?
By the way, Brian Bosworth might have been run over by Bo Jackson, but Bo Jackson never made a movie as good as Stone Cold. So
that's a great
trade-offs.
Movie. That's a great movie.
Life's full of trade-offs. Anyway, that was Secure Starts presented by Visa.